20-year-old Amber Tuccaro was from Mikisew Cree First Nation, an indigenous population in northern Canada. She had a 14-year-old son named Jacob and was living with her mother in Fort McMurray, Alberta, Canada at the time. It was on August 17th of 2010 when Amber took a flight to Edmonton with Jacob and one of her friends for a vacation. They booked a hotel in a small town called Nisku, eagerly anticipating their getaway activities. The next day at around 8 p.m., Amber was seen accepting a ride from an unidentified man. During the car ride, Amber received a phone call and the man could be heard in the background assuring her that they were moving east toward Edmonton on a back road.
Where are we by?
We're just heading south of Beaumont, or north of Beaumont.
We're heading north of Beaumont. Yo, where are we going? No, this is a... Are you f***ing kidding me? You better not take me anywhere I don't want to go. I want to go into the city. Jeez. Yo, we're not going into the city, are we?
We're going.
No, we're not.
Yes.
Then where the f*** are these roads going to?
50th Street.
50th Street. Are you sure?
Absolutely.
Yo, where are we going?
50th Street.
50th Street?
50th Street.
East, right?
East.
Over down.
Travel.
Down.
This phone call was the last time anyone had any contact with Amber Tuccaro. On September 4th of 2010, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police held a press conference where they said that they did not believe Amber was in any danger. Her family thought the police weren't taking the case seriously enough, and the authorities were operating under common stereotypes about Indigenous women rather than taking an objective approach to Amber's disappearance. The lackadaisical approach to the case resulted in it going cold, and Amber's friends and family were left without any answers. Amber was eventually listed as a missing person, but she was removed from the database due to some unconfirmed sightings. She was placed back on the list in September of 2010, but the police never even bothered to apologize to her family. As it turns out, Amber's family was absolutely correct about the authorities not taking her case seriously enough. On September 1st of 2012, horseback riders discovered Amber's remains in a field in Leduc County. Her dental records were used to identify her. You might think that the authorities increased their vigor in Amber's case once her body was found, but you would be wrong. Her family stated that the police rarely gave them any updates about the investigation, and they told Amber's brother, Paul, that they had waited for a whole year before releasing the phone call audio to the public. This understandably infuriated Amber's family, and they filed a complaint with the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in 2014. An independent review of the investigation of Amber's disappearance was conducted, and the 120-page report was released in August of 2018. It found that the investigation was deficient in that various members were either not properly trained or did not adhere to their training, and that various members did not comply with procedures and guidelines. Furthermore, the report found that the authorities had not bothered to investigate Amber's disappearance until a full month after she was reported missing. Apparently, when confronted by her family, the police simply said that Amber was probably out partying and they needed to wait 24 hours before they could do anything. 24 hours became 1 month and gave Amber's kidnapper plenty of time to cover his tracks. There was also a 4-month gap between the initial disappearance and the day when the police began conducting interviews, and the commission described this gap as unreasonable and unexplained. Finally, the report stated that the decision to remove Amber from the list of missing persons was clearly a mistake. The Canadian public heavily criticized the authorities for how poorly they handled Amber's case. In particular, there was outrage over the fact that they never even questioned the friend with whom Amber had been traveling. She was never even considered a person of interest. There was also a suitcase that Amber had brought with her on the trip that was destroyed after the police confiscated it. A constable and a corporal with the Leduc authorities failed to properly follow policy or reasonable investigative practices for securing seized property. 11 months after the 2018 report was released, Deputy Commissioner Curtis Zablocki apologized to Amber's family, an apology which was promptly rejected. In my opinion, I don't blame them for that. The police were openly dismissive of Amber's case, immediately assuming that she was partying and not bothering to actually confirm their theory. Amber Tuccaro's case is yet another instance of Canadian law enforcement putting in the minimal amount of effort possible with Indigenous victims. Hopefully things can improve in the future and the mistakes that were made in Amber's case won't be made again. "66-year-old Geraldine Largay went by Gerry. She was a retired Air Force nurse with a passion for hiking. Her Tennessee home had plenty of long trails nearby and she had hiked them countless times. In July of 2013, Gerry became inspired to tackle a new hiking destination, the Appalachian Trail. She knew it would be far more difficult than her normal hikes, but she was up for the challenge. The only problem was that Gerry didn't have a very good sense of direction, and she was afraid to be alone in the wilderness. However, she decided to conquer her fears. She committed to a through hike of the trail, which is over 2,000 miles long. George Largay, Gerry's husband, said hiking the Appalachian Trail and sleeping in tents and wearing the same stuff for 3 and 4 days in the rain, not on my bucket list, but she needed to be supported on the hike because she had limits on what she could carry, so I simply had to say, okay, suck it up. What's 6 months in the grand scheme of things? So I did it. He helped Gerry prepare for the trip and even planned on meeting her at the Route 27 crossing, but he wasn't with her on the hike itself. On July 22nd of 2013, Gerry attempted to send a text message to George. The message read, "In some trouble. Got off the trail to go to bathroom. Now lost. Can you call AMC to see if a trail maintainer can help me? Somewhere north of Woods Road, XOX." The message never sent due to the lack of service in the wilderness. Records showed that Gerry tried to send the same text to George 10 more times throughout the following hour and a half, but it never worked. The following day, George was extremely worried and a search effort was launched. It began with the Warden Service performing foot searches, then expanded to include aircraft, dogs, state police, national park rangers, and firefighters. Unfortunately, the weather impeded the search effort, with heavy rains obscuring the trail and washing away evidence of human activity. 2 full years would pass before any new information would be uncovered. It was in October of 2015 when a United States Navy forester discovered a body in the wilderness. Lieutenant Kevin Adam thought to himself, the possibilities were, it was a human body, it was animal bones, or if it was a human body, was it Gerry Largay? He found a campsite near the body, and his question was answered. I saw a flattened tent with a green backpack outside of it and a human skull with what I believed to be a sleeping bag around it. I was 99% certain that this was Gerry Largay's. Lieutenant Adam also noted that the campsite would be extremely difficult to see due to several large trees directly next to it. These trees also had numerous thick branches that blocked any aerial view. Gerry had built a bed out of small trees, pine needles, and dirt. She also tied a blanket between some branches to protect her from the elements. Some of the nearby trees also showed signs of charring, indicating that Gerry had attempted to light fires on more than one occasion. An opening in the tree cover was near the campsite and would have allowed Gerry's camp to be seen by the aircraft. She most likely chose the spot under the trees as a way to escape the rain, but that decision had the side effect of hiding her from view. The campsite contained maps, Gerry's rain jacket, string, Ziploc baggies, a flashlight that was still functioning, a baseball cap, dental floss, and a homemade necklace. Finally, Gerry's black notebook was also in the campsite with a layer of moss growing on the cover. One journal entry was dated August 6, 2013, which was 2 weeks after she first went missing. The entry reads, "When you find my body, please call my husband George and my daughter Carrie. It will be the greatest kindness for them to know that I am dead and where you found me, no matter how many years from now. Please find it in your heart to mail the contents of this bag to one of them. As a whole, the notebook described how Gerry had spent 2 days wandering around the forest after she took a wrong turn across a stream. She had also tried to find high ground from which she would have been able to regain her sense of direction. This effort sadly failed, and she was forced to make camp. The very last journal entry was dated August 18th, but Lieutenant Adams stated that Gerry could have been mistaken about the date. The medical examiner determined that Gerry's cause of death had been exposure. Unlike the first case in this video, the authorities handled their search effort very seriously. They were dedicated to the case and did everything in their power to find Gerry. In a tragic twist of fate, the campsite at which Gerry had perished was only 2 miles away from the Appalachian Trail. It was also only a 30-minute walk away from a logging road. Hopefully Gerry's case can serve as a reminder to always be careful and stay on the trail when hiking. If there's anything positive to be taken from the case, it's that Gerry was able to survive for almost a month in the wilderness at 66 years old. Human beings have a strong survival instinct, and Gerry's case is just one example of that. 17-year-olds Jennifer Harbison and Eliza Thomas were employees at I Can't Believe It's Yogurt in Austin, Texas in 1991. Jennifer's 15-year-old sister Sarah and Sarah's 13-year-old friend Amy Ayers were waiting in the yogurt shop for Jennifer's shift to end on December 6th so they could catch a ride home. The shop's closing time was 11 p.m. and at approximately 10 p.m. a customer went to use the bathroom. This man had been heckling the people in line, trying to get them to move faster. A couple who left the shop just before closing time reported seeing this man and one other man sitting at a table, acting suspiciously. Just before midnight on December 6th, a patrolman with the Austin Police Department noticed that there was a fire in the yogurt shop. He contacted the local fire department and firefighters arrived on scene, where they quickly extinguished the flames. Tragically, there was no saving the girls. All 4 of them had been shot in the head execution style, and they were all completely nude. Sarah's hands were bound behind her back with a pair of women's underwear, and she had been gagged. There was evidence that she had also been SA'd. Eliza was bound and gagged in a similar manner to Sarah. Jennifer's hands were not bound, but they were still behind her back. The 3 girls had been charred by the fire as well. Amy's body was found in a different part of the shop. Unlike the other girls who had each been charred by the fire, Amy had received 2nd and 3rd degree burns on a substantial part of her body. There was a cloth wrapped around her neck and she had also been shot, but her bullet wounds were a little different. For one thing, the first bullet had missed her brain. For a second, she had another bullet wound that passed through her brain and exited through her cheek and jawline. An investigation began and numerous persons of interest were looked into very quickly. One of them in particular was a 15-year-old boy who was caught with a handgun in a nearby mall a few days after the slaughter. Under questioning, the boy implicated 3 of his friends. None of them were older than 17 years old. The detectives eventually released the boy, but a new detective was put on the case several years later. This new investigator decided that the group of teenagers, who by this time were in their 20s, were credible suspects. Numerous interrogations were conducted on the suspects, and they each confessed to the murders. These young men were Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, Maurice Pierce, and Forrest Wellborn. The Austin Police Department had no record of the interrogations, making it impossible for investigators to know how much information, if any, was revealed to the suspects about the case. Springsteen and Scott were brought to trial due to their confessions, and the prosecution explained the murders in great detail. However, they provided no hard evidence of the suspects' guilt. All they had were the confessions. Both were found guilty, and one was sentenced to death while the other was sentenced to life in prison. After the convictions, the prosecution's tactics were scrutinized and found to have violated the Confrontation Clause. The Confrontation Clause is a part of the Sixth Amendment that gives the accused the right to be confronted with the prosecuting witnesses. This right had been violated during the trial, and both convictions were subsequently overturned. Both men were set free in 2009. The prosecution didn't give up after the overturned conviction. Instead, they insisted on retrying both suspects, but this would never happen. A forensic investigation revealed that the male DNA found on the victims did not match either suspect. In fact, it didn't match any of the 4 men who had confessed to the murders. The question then became, Why would the men confess to a set of murders that they didn't actually commit? The physical evidence clearly indicated their innocence, but they had told the authorities they were guilty. As it turns out, one of the detectives who had run some of the interrogations was a man named Hector Palenko. Palenko had been accused of coercing false confessions in a previous case. Although no specific account of the interrogations is available, it seems very likely that Palenko threatened and intimidated the suspects into confessing, even though they were innocent. When this information was brought to the public eye, 7 of the jurors from the original trial stated that they would not have convicted the suspects if they had known this information. Both Springsteen and Scott had been mistreated by the investigators, falsely convicted due to that mistreatment, and undoubtedly had their reputations destroyed because of it. Despite all of this, the Texas courts decided that they were not entitled to compensation for the misery they were put through because they hadn't actually proven their innocence. Personally, I think this decision is unreasonable. The DNA at the crime scene did not match either of them and thereby proved their innocence, which in my mind absolutely does entitle both men to compensation. Unfortunately, the Texas courts don't think like I do. After all of these messy legal proceedings, it's still unknown who murdered the 4 girls in that yogurt shop. One theory suggested that they may have been the victims of a serial killer named Kenneth McDuff, who had been in the Austin area at the time. He was eventually ruled out as a suspect, although he was executed in 1998 for his other crimes. In the years following the yogurt shop murders, the Austin police have admitted that over 50 different people have confessed to the murders. Many of these people have been ruled out as suspects. To this day, the real killer remains a mystery. Maybe this will change with advancements in DNA testing technology, or maybe this quadruple murderer will remain in the shadows forever. Click on the Join button to become a channel member today. Channel members receive exclusive content and early access to all my content. "22-year-old Riley Strain was a senior at the University of Missouri in 2024. On March 8th, he spent the night out with his fellow Delta Chi fraternity brothers in downtown Nashville, Tennessee. When they arrived at their hotel, Riley texted his mother to let her know. He may have been a college student, but he was cognizant of his mother's concern for him, and he wanted to keep her in the loop. Delta Chi went to a bar and had a great time, but something was off with Riley. At one point relatively early in the night, he sent another text to his mother telling her that he had ordered a rum and coke that didn't taste good. Shortly after this, employees told Riley to leave the bar due to his behavior, which was rather unusual. Riley had only ordered 1 alcoholic drink and 2 waters, so he clearly should not have been drunk, certainly not nearly enough to be causing a scene. Riley left the bar, and surveillance footage from a nearby business shows the moments directly afterwards. As you can see, Riley is stumbling down the road, and he even falls down at one point. This kind of behavior is indicative of extreme intoxication. Later that night, a police officer was patrolling on Gay Street when Riley happened to walk past him. The officer's body cam picked up the interaction, which is very brief.
How you doing, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Based on the way Riley was acting in front of the officer, many people have theorized that he was trying to act sober in order to avoid suspicion. If that theory is accurate, then Riley's effort worked perfectly. The officer doesn't show any suspicion or concern in regards to Riley's behavior. In a cruel twist of fate, this interaction with the police officer would be the last time Riley Strain was ever seen alive. Maybe things would have turned out differently if he had asked the officer for help, or maybe not. Unfortunately, we'll never know. The morning after Riley's disappearance, his mother Michelle received a phone call from one of Riley's frat brothers. This brother asked if she had heard anything from Riley, which she hadn't. Michelle and her husband Chris both immediately made the trip from Missouri to Nashville in order to look for Riley. Riley's father, Ryan Gilbert, also made the trip to look for his son. According to Michelle, Riley's frat brothers all of a sudden disappeared during the search effort. They showed up again a little later in their dress clothes to go out to their formal that night. The search effort turned up no sign of Riley, and they were forced to report him missing to the Nashville Police Department. 2 weeks later, on March 22nd, the police found Riley's body in the Cumberland River in West Nashville. They removed the corpse and performed an autopsy, which revealed some very disturbing details. At first, the police assumed Riley's death had been an accidental drowning due to his intoxication and the fact that he had been found in a river. However, the autopsy revealed that there was no water in his lungs, which contradicts the theory that he drowned. Chris stated that usually water in the lungs means that they were alive when they went into the water. Furthermore, Riley's body didn't show any bruises, scrapes, or cuts, which was very unusual given the terrain surrounding the river. The bank of the Cumberland River is significantly elevated above the water level, meaning that Riley would have fallen down an incline. A fall of that nature would undoubtedly cause some minor injuries, but none were found anywhere on his body. Riley's stepfather Chris stated that, "If he truly fell in the water and you can prove that to me, show me. I'll accept it. But I can tell you from all the stuff that we've done as far as searching, looking, taking pictures, I don't feel like it's really possible to happen. He may have fallen. Somebody helped him in the water." One final unnerving detail about Riley's body is that he had no pants on when the police found him. His wallet and cowboy boots were also missing. Chris said that the only thing that was found with him, as the police stated in the report, was the watch and the shirt. Riley's family believed that foul play could have been the cause of his death, but the police have found no hard evidence of this. According to a forensic pathologist named Priya Banerjee, it is difficult to accurately make the leap from an accident to foul play. 8 miles is really long undercurrent. I think you could lose things. Based on this quote, Banerjee seems to think that the current pulled off Riley's boots and pants. Finally, the toxicology report on Riley's body has been finished, but it has not yet been released to the public. I am personally very interested to know what substances were in Riley's body at the time of his death because of the eerie text he sent his mother about his rum and coke tasting bad. Could Riley have been drugged by someone at the bar, potentially a bartender? Maybe, but it's also possible that he was just drunk and the employees who said he only ordered one drink were mistaken. As of right now, we don't know for sure. One last detail I want to add about Riley's case is the theory that has been posited online. This theory is by no means supported by law enforcement or even Riley's own family, but I would feel amiss if I didn't at least mention it. According to several true crime junkies who are familiar with Riley's case, his disappearance and the subsequent discovery of his body fall in line with the modus operandi of a smiley face killer. The theory of smiley face murders is connected to a variety of different young men who have been found dead in bodies of water around the United States. These men were presumed to have been victims of drowning, but some people think they were murdered by one or multiple killers. Supporters of this theory cite smiley faces that were found near the scenes of the crimes. Of course, in Riley's case, no smiley face has been found near the place where he was found. Many people also believe this theory is more of a conspiracy theory than a legitimate possibility. Either way, the circumstances surrounding Riley's death are currently unclear, but hopefully that will change as new information is brought to light. If foul play was involved, then we can only cross our fingers and hope that the perpetrator gets caught.